everyone, Gabrielle here. Today I'm going to show you a technique I've been playing with, which is called Collagraph printing on the Gelli plate. And Collagraph printing is where you build up a printing plate with a whole layers and layers of textures, often using cardboard or other collage materials. And I'm going to show you how I did a kind of very simple Collagraph plate of this owl. So I started with a drawing that I'd made of the owl, and I'm just showing you here how I'm using tracing paper to be able to create a number of the same image, because what I want to do is build up layers of this owl so that I have the base, but then also the feathers and the face, and that they'll all line up when I want to assemble him on the plate. So when you do the tracing, you do it backwards and then you flip it back again, and yeah, you can see that I'm showing you how to do tracing, but it's just very useful because you only have to do it once and then you can trace multiple times onto different pieces of card. So you can see here I'm just using manila folder. It's really good with Collagraph. You can use really any old scraps of cardboard, you can use cereal packets, anything really. I've just got 3 bits of old manila folder here, and so I'm starting by cutting out the owl. So I've got on the blue piece of card, that's going to be my background, and I've got the owl there so I can see how it will all line up. And then on this pink piece, I'm cutting out the owl shape. I'm going to line him up. And then on the purple piece, I'm going to cut out his face and feathers, and then I'll assemble that also. With Collagraph, it's really cool that when you have a shape and that it's sort of overlapping another shape or sitting on top of another shape, the edges of the cardboard shape will print as a really lovely kind of graphic line. So it's a great way to kind of create line work without actually having to paint or draw onto the plate, but it leaves this really lovely kind of printed line. So you can see here I'm cutting out the feathers because I want a line where each of those feathers overlaps. I just decided to do it this way. In the end, I kind of tried a different version where I kind of cut them out separately, but this was just an experiment to see what happened if I kind of almost lined them up but not quite and left a gap between them. So it can be a little bit laborious to assemble the plate the first time that you do it, but the great thing about Collagraph is that once you've done it and you've made this plate, it's kind of like making a picture, but in sort of like a collage picture, then you can use that to print multiple times. Sometimes if you do many prints, the acrylic paint can build up on the Collagraph plate and make the detail a bit less clear, but really you can certainly do quite a few prints. So it can be really good if you wanted to do like a series of cards, or if you wanted to try different colors but with the same design. At the end of this, you can see I did another version of this owl using some teal in the background just to try something totally different. You can see here what I'm doing. So I've assembled, using a glue stick, I've assembled the layers of the owl here, and then I'm cutting out his eyes with a craft knife. When you cut out holes in your Collagraph plate, anything that's kind of like a hole will end up being that same color as your lines, whatever your base printing color is. So I tend to go for dark colors, and so those eye shapes will end up being like black or sort of dark eyes. So yeah, it's a good, if you have any kind of areas in your picture that you want dark, cutting out the shape is a great way to do that, to preserve that darkness. So here I'm just assembling it. You can see there's quite a few different elements of this print, and I'm just using a glue stick to assemble them. Here I found some old really cheap textured watercolor paper, and I thought that might make a good texture for hills. And then I've painted some crackle medium onto another piece of manila folder to make this tree trunk texture. You don't have to do it at all, but I'd always kind of wondered what it would be like to use crackle medium and if that texture would actually print. And it did print really well. And actually the more I used the Collagraph, the more the texture kind of became really pronounced. So it will kind of leave quite a dark shape, but with that crackle. And you can see here I'm using skeleton leaves. So I've actually, you can use real leaves. If you use real leaves, it's best to put them with the sort of the vein side up. But skeleton leaves are great. They really leave that really defined kind of leaf shape. So then I'm just using glue stick to position those, and then I'm going to go and cut cut it around just to make the plate nice and neat. And then I was thinking about it and I decided that actually I wanted the background, so the sky, I wanted that to be dark because it was nighttime. So I decided to cut that off, and then I would use the moon kind of separately, like a little stamp. So you just have to not lose those little bits that are separate. And so now I'm actually finally ready to print. A lot of faffing around first. So just laying out some Payne's Grey. I use Matisse structure paints. I find them really good in terms of holding detail, and I kind of like to have a mix. So I've got Payne's Grey and Phthalo Blue. I just find that variation can make things look a bit nicer than just one tone. So braying out, trying to get a nice thin, even layer. You still want enough paint on there that it will actually pick up those textures. And then just plonking that Collagraph plate down. I kind of like that little owl peeking out. And here it's really good if you can just press quite gently. You want all those pieces, all those lovely textures and kind of overlapping shapes that you've created to make good contact with the Gelli plate. But you don't want to, if you press too hard, what can happen is that it picks up all the paint off the gel plate, and then you don't get a very good, you don't get those lovely dark lines and shadows. So just gentle contact, but not too much. And you can kind of peel off a little bit and peek. You can see that crackle texture on the tree trunk, as it's quite dark, but it does leave that lovely texture when you look close. It just always feels a bit magic to me how it just leaves this picture so beautifully, and all the sort of shadows around each shape. So now what I'm doing, I just thought I'd show you how, if you wanted to get some other colours onto your print, you can do that before you print. You could always paint onto the print, but it's kind of, there's something nice about it all just being in one print. So I'm just using, I think I was using some golden paints there, but really anything works. And I've discovered that makeup sponges are really good for getting paint onto the gel plate. They just seem to kind of make it quite easy to get that paint on without leaving a lot of the lines and sort of things of brushes. Although I did kind of mess it up here, I think I had to scrape a little bit off. It's a really good idea to let that base colour, the grey, dry first before you then add the next layers. And it's not like if you are a bit messy, it doesn't really matter because this is the underneath, and so those lines will be on top. So it's kind of a bit forgiving at this point. And I just added a little bit more yellow into the trunk of the tree to try and balance that a bit. So that's it. And now it's time to pull the print. I'm using this Kmart cheap white that I find just is kind of a bit miraculous in the way that it always manages to pull the print so well, and it's so cheap. And just doing a really thin layer here. I think any cheap acrylic white would be good, just not one that's too expensive and has a lot of really good pigment in it. I find that those just don't pull the print in the same way. But it's always just a matter of trial and error, isn't it? And you can see that, so now I'm laying down some hot press watercolour paper. I didn't tape the edges this time, I just thought I would get the actual kind of edges of the Gelli plate. We'll have that sort of rough edge look. You can see the Collagraph plate there, and actually when I pull the print, it will actually be facing the same direction as the Collagraph. So there's kind of no surprises if you want to put letters or other things in. And now the big reveal. I love this moment. It's always exciting when it all comes off well. And then you can see the little owl peeking out. And that, I thought that worked really well. I was excited when that one came out. I think the feathers, I'm not quite convinced about those, but it was an interesting experiment. And yeah, that's pretty much it. It was great fun and lots of potential there. You can see a different version. I fixed the feathers, and anyway, but have a great time. Hope you have fun making your own Collagraph. Thanks. Bye.